evening, everyone. I'm Ruby Chen, live in Vietnam, channel VVC. Just in, at 2 p.m. this afternoon in Amdo, Tibet, a Buddhist monk set himself alight and sat in meditation on the street, attracting crowds to this horrible display of protest against the Chinese reign of their country.
The number of self-immolations performed by Tibetan Buddhist monks as their nonviolent form of rebellion has risen and fallen throughout the years of 2011 and 2013. This displays an unsteady field of results and suggests that the patterns of self-immolation protests had been unplanned, possibly acting in accordance to Chinese government's actions that dissatisfied the Tibetan religious community. In November 2012, however, a drastically high number of 28 self-immolations occurred, suggesting a mass protest in response to Chinese expansion of authority in Tibet.
There has been dangerous conflict arising amongst the two ethnic groups, the Han Chinese and the Tibetans. China, aware that separatist activities may destabilize Tibet, are battling the protests of members from the Tibetan population to maintain rule over their land. For further understanding of the conflict, BBC will provide numerous visual representations of the conflict live in Tibet with YeonSoo Park and Kyuwon.
Thank you, Ruby. Hello, I am YeonSoo Park, and yes, there are many evident indicators of the currently animated conflict between Tibet and China. One of the main causes for this heated conflict between the two countries is the increasing Han population in Tibet. This map here is province-wide, showing individual towns. The stock distribution map displays the population of both ethnic groups involved in the ongoing religious conflict, the Han Chinese in red and the Tibetans in blue. The Han Chinese are beginning to flourish throughout the lands of Tibet from encouragement of the Chinese government, in an effort to possibly dominate Chinese population over Tibetan territory. This has obviously incited hostility among the Tibetans towards the Chinese, which further stimulates conflict and animosity between the two ethnic groups. Statistics show that in Tibetan land there are 2 Han Chinese citizens for every Tibetan, making them a minority of their own land and therefore undermining Tibetan ethnicity. The Chinese government is in an attempt to intermix the two ethnic groups and merge them into one under the rule of the Han Chinese, simultaneously spreading their modernized views and influence into Tibet. This map is a continent-wide map showing individual countries that are affected by China. As we can see, China not only tries to claim Tibet, but also tries to have their influence on other parts of Asia, such as northern part of Vietnam and North Korea. This shows how China is trying to expand their power to other countries. Moreover, we can also notice a geographic pattern of distance decay, where all the countries that have political conflict with China share border with China, showing that the closer they are to China, the more conflicts occur. This map relates to our topic because this map supports Tibet's statement, which argues that they are just another one of China's victims in forceful political expansion, which is currently ignoring Tibet's independence. This map is a countrywide map showing individual provinces, and it clearly sums up how religious conflict also directly causes conflict in the control of land. It directly portrays Chinese dominance, as even with the small portion of land the Tibetans began with, their territory is progressively decreasing in size while Chinese territory is increasing. This reveals how the Chinese are successful in restraining and dominating the Tibetans, proving Chinese authority and the power of their military.
Thank you, YeonSoo Park. China's obvious suppression of Tibetan culture emphasizes their desire to maintain their rule, supported by their wealth and power status. The differences between religion and culture act as a spark of conflict between the two, who believe their own ethnicity is superior.
Here is a live footage of Chinese soldiers interrupting Tibetan religious practices. The inequality of power between China and Tibet and China's unfair use of military power has added fuel to this ongoing conflict. Freedom! Now I'd like to deliver Tibet's perspective of this conflict through a member of religious Tibetan community. Here is a Tibetan protester who has been maintaining for several years, teaching. 2 years ago, he had been working for a Chinese factory, but In effort to rebel against China and their oppressions, he has quit his job since then and has meditated to become a monk. Now I'd like to pass it on to reporter Yunjae.
Teaching, what is your intention for this protest?
Si Mordecai si kete po sige te Mordecai si le bote te ki po ya te si le to sikile wala ya o ya o zigo po si ayo to hake la poze
Right.
hake la poze
Right.
poze lo poze hete wakayo sa
Oh, I understand. I understand you. I understand you.
ze
Alright.
ze close koda
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be the interview with Mr. Teaching.
Despite Tibetan disapproval of the railroad construction, China's contrasting power status enforces the development and modernization of Tibet against Tibetan wishes of a traditional region. Tibet, originally having enclosed traditions, is now predicted to be forcefully industrialized by China. Next up, we have reporter Shim live interviewing a local citizen complaining against how the constructions are bringing unwanted industrialization.
Hi, I'm reporter Shim, interviewing one of the local citizens of Tibet. How do you feel about China's enforced modernization?
Ski, what they select, Osekala Kuyusu, Seke Polotia, Ola Seya, Siki Topo. La, see you follows, look this way. Zekele Polaya Soto. Polaya City, Onsalaya. Cose Polo Kaya. Azela, yeah?
But what do you mean by taking over the control?
La, that's it. See, te que bola, si tu tolo, tu pso que psala, do se gale ya. See, this see, silly yo. Silo podik. Zaga. Yeah.
Thank you.
See.
As China attempts to use Tibetan resources, there has been conflict between Tibetans, who struggle in response to protect the environment, and China, who try to mine regardless of Tibetan disapproval. 47% of the world's population depend on the route of the fresh water from Tibet. I have invited this professional environmentalist, Mr. Michael. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And yes, my colleagues and I believe that continuation of mining for gold and other substances will pollute major rivers that follow through their land, an explanation behind Tibet's reserved environment.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Despite the ongoing conflict, Tibet and China are arranging a resolution resulting in some Tibetan autonomy. Next, we have a video clip of the Dalai Lama expressing his opinions of the future of both Tibet and this conflict.
I am optimistic about how the conflict will settle between us and China. We are negotiating a solution where Tibet has autonomy under Chinese sovereignty in hopes of bringing an end to hardships, to conflict, and to suffering.
Hello, I am Professor Park from Harvard University, majored in world conflicts and world history. The chronic conflict between China and Tibet is one that is exceptionally sensitive. This conflict is one that is directly proportional to the international model of religious conflicts. The religious conflict between Tibet and China has been lasting for the last few centuries, and the contrast between Tibetan religious views and the Chinese political intake on society caused their inability to negotiate peace. The major conflict was evoked in 1951 when the Chinese government mainly tried to overtake Tibet's political power. During this conflict, many of the Tibetan protesters were killed by police fire from China. 1.5 to 2 million of Tibetans have been displaced by Chinese government so that they can control the Tibetans' natural resources. However, the current Dalai Lama is optimistic about how the conflict will settle and that it will be resolved very soon, stating that China has been acting according to reality. This graph here displays a poll on international critics' views of China's grip on Tibetan land and autonomy. Critics believe in granting Tibet autonomy, whereas China believes in keeping Tibet under their rule since modernization has strongly benefited them. One of the main causes that has sparked conflict is the increasing numbers of Han immigrants in the Tibetan region, which creates resentment between the two parties. This follows the first cause model in the international model of religious conflicts, reading that religious and cultural differences play a major role in conflicts between opposing ethnic groups. This leads to a superiority of beliefs. In Tibet, the increasing number of Han immigrants can be seen as Chinese invasion of Tibetan territory, causing their refusal to intermix. Another cause is that the Tibetans are accusing Chinese of suppressing their cultural worship. This directly follows the third model of causes in the model of international religious conflicts, reading that inequality of power and wealth between ethnic groups can lead to conflicts. In the same way, due to religious conflicts, Tibetan customs are considered to be less valuable by the Chinese, therefore suppressed and prevented. The contrast of power between China and Tibet causes the Tibetans to be helpless against Chinese suppression. There are three major geographic landscape patterns, and surprisingly, they all follow the international model of religious conflicts. There is forced ongoing modernization in Tibet, for example, the construction of railway between Lhasa and Chiang, and this follows the seventh pattern model for the model of conflicts, reading that disparities in development between ethnic religious groups is apparent. Correspondingly, China forcing unwanted modernization onto Tibetan land and encouraging their unity through further development. Following the same model is another significant pattern of the conflict. The Chinese government is creating many different environmental issues. One of the issues concerned mining. The Chinese government is still enforcing the Tibetans to mine the resources despite of their opposition. Due to the contrast of power between the Chinese government and Tibet, China allows themselves to make use of Tibetan land despite Tibetan refusal, though invalid because of Chinese strength. And furthermore, the act of self-immolation by Tibetan monks may be seen as a method of protest against Chinese rule and an anti-violent protest for the media to respond to. And this is a paragon of the fourth pattern model in the international model of religious conflicts, asserting that there is a high use of symbols, propaganda, and political means as an expression of this conflict. A possible solution that the Tibetans are currently looking forward to is some kind of action from the world's Parliament of Religions. They are hoping that the Parliament will propose a resolution which is a common solution parties in a conflict often look for in the international model of religious conflicts and in the solution models. A third party or state often involves itself in the resolution and solution of ethnic religious conflicts. Likewise, Tibet and especially Dalai Lama hopes and invokes for help from the World Parliament of Religions to come up with a resolution in resolving this conflict between Tibet and China. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to reporters YeonSoo Park and Kyuwon Shin. Coming up next, after the commercials, the results of the Super Bowl, wherein the Seattle Seahawks claimed a massive, rather legendary victory.